find another way, especially when...
But despite clinics administering so-called puberty blockers to children for a quarter of a century, little is known about their long-term effects. Now, a new analysis seen by Newsnight sheds some light in this much debated but little understood area of children's medicine. Puberty blockers work on the brain to stop the release of sex hormones. That then prevents things like periods and breast growth in girls, and Adam's apples and breaking voices in boys. These drugs aren't licensed to be used this way. They're approved to treat prostate and other cancers, endometriosis, and to chemically castrate sex offenders. In children, they're only approved to delay the onset of early or precocious puberty, where NHS England says the evidence base is strong and the clinical approach is not contested. The lack of a robust evidence base for their use in treating gender dysphoria has led to a radical rethink by the health service. Puberty blockers will no longer be routinely given to children on the NHS, only to those taking part in clinical trials. This more cautious approach is happening in other European countries too.
It was first of all when I was doing the book, and then later on when we were doing the analysis.
David Friedman is a retired social science researcher. In the 1990s, he edited a book on young people with gender dysphoria with the founder of the Tavistock's Gender Identity Development Service, or GIDS. He then carried out an audit of children who'd been referred to GIDS up to that point.
Where they differed from the general population was in areas such as disrupted home life, areas around sexual abuse, living in children's homes. And then there was a great deal of associated psychopathology, emotional upsets and disturbances and things like that, much more than you would have found in the general population.
What was the purpose of the audit, in your mind?
I assumed that from the work we'd done, that we had given a basis for further audits and research that would then...
This first comprehensive audit would seemingly be GIDS's last too. I first spoke with David Friedman about it last year.
I remember my jaw dropped on the end of the phone. You hope and assume that as part of the skill and part of the clinical decisions that are being made in the care of your children, that it's being made based on the best available evidence, and that that evidence is as up to date as possible. And it seemed to me that this had stopped happening at the GIDS. I felt children were actually being abused, treatment to them. And I felt completely alone. I didn't know what to do.
What David did next was to contact Professor Susan McPherson, one of 3 others who'd carried out the GIDS audit with him so many years before.
And so I looked her up and found that she's now a university professor, and that she has a special interest in looking at the outcomes of mental health treatments and looking at change over time. And I wrote her a very polite email, "Dear Professor McPherson, I don't know if you remember me." And then we met and we just talked.
As they talked, they were drawn back into research together, this time on puberty blockers. The pair reanalysed a landmark GIDS and University College London Hospital study of 44 12 to 15-year-olds given puberty blockers. In 2021, the team reported there'd been no changes in psychological function, no benefit, no harm. Despite that, back in 2014, the study was used to justify a permanent shift to making blockers available at much younger ages. The GIDS and UCLH team stressed that although they couldn't show any benefit to these young people of being on puberty blockers, it was also the case, and I'm quoting, "It is unlikely that the treatment resulted in psychological harm." The study used scores from reliable and widely used parent and child questionnaires that assess children's behavioural and emotional problems. As is a standard way of looking at data, the official results were based on averaging these scores.
We both, in talking, basically said, well, in this situation, the mean is essentially meaningless. Because if you've got 44 young people, let's say, and let's say over a period of time, 11 do extremely well on the puberty blocker. 11 do quite well, 11 do extremely badly, and 11 do quite badly. And you make an average, you get, oh, no change.
The Tavistock have made the study's raw data available to others. When Macpherson and Friedman reanalysed it, exploring changes at an individual level, they found something very different. The mental health of the majority of children was significantly impacted, for both good and bad. After 12 months of puberty blocker injections, 34% had deteriorated, 29% had improved, 37% were unchanged. To be clear what this means, a child who deteriorated could be moving from being psychologically well to meeting criteria for a psychiatric diagnosis such as depression or anxiety. A child who